Okay, welcome back to members of 121 Community Church in Grapevine, Texas, in our ongoing study in Paul and the Faithfulness of God by N.T. Wright, published by Fortress Press. We're going to continue looking at the contributions of the Stoic philosophy for Paul. Let's begin with the triad on the left. There were Stoic variations within the Stoic view. There was a fluctuation between polytheism and monotheism. There was a fluctuation between immanence and transcendence of the divine. Therefore, there are variances from within the Stoic position itself. So Paul didn't draw from a very simplistic Stoic view. He had true food for thought for his position from variances within Stoicism itself. He had a wealth of concepts to consider. Now, if we want to look at these contributions, if you look at Block 2, we're going to take a look at Seneca and Rufus first. Now, Seneca posited hatred for cruelty. At age 50, he became the tutor for Nero, the corrupt emperor. That only lasted for 10 years because Nero was so corrupt. There were rumors that in the early church, Paul and Seneca had actually met and exchanged correspondence, but this is also deeply contested by scholarship. He retired from his official office as advisor to Nero in AD 62. He opposed Epicurean thought vigorously. His contribution to Paul was significant. He posited the God who is near, with, and within the believer. He posited God's presence. He also posited the concept of the Holy Spirit that indwells as guardian or parakletos, and he posited a spiritual enemy of the daimones. So he did offer some great resources for Paul's consideration. Now, Busonius Rufus, his contribution to Paul was that he taught equality of women and a very strict sexual ethics, which was lacking in Greek culture. Now, if you go on to Block 3, we'll take a look at Epictetus and Aurelius and their contributions. We'll begin by taking a look at Epictetus. He was a slave to Nero's minister, Epaphroditus. He was actually banished to northwest Greece for being considered a subversive. His contribution to Paul is significant. He posited the idea of a personal God, of God as subject. That's a very important concept. He posited the image of God in humans as reason and intelligence. And then he also posited the idea of, and this is key, the concept of God as Father. So God as subject, the image of God, and God as Father, those are extremely significant. He did also posit the idea of a personal daimones or guardian angel, and he posited the concept of the elect, which was certainly taken up by Paul, but he emphasized the fact that human beings are choosing types of human beings, and through our choices we become witnesses and we become the elect. So you can see there's some real value here from Epictetus and from Aurelius, really from all four, from Seneca, Rufus, Epictetus, and Aurelius. All four did contribute great resources, conceptual resources for Paul to consider. So there were conceptual ideas within Stoicism and the variances of Stoicism that Paul could consider. But he was also influenced by the tonality of his theology by the cynics and the skeptics. They influenced his tone of theology, which is key. That's an important aspect of theology, of course. We're going to take a look at that triad on the right. We're going to begin with Block 1, the cynics and the skeptics. The most important concept here to understand is parousia, that was offered by the cynics. And it was all about free and practical and honest speech. It was a form of an extreme stoicism. Skepticism contributed to the idea of dynamic truth and the fact that the senses could be deceived. Therefore, certainty of truth cannot be mastered in an all-at-once moment. Certainty was posited as unavailable, and they did oppose the idea of cognitive impressions by the Stoics. But with all of that, Cicero still took up Stoic ideas of immortality of the soul, the divinity of reason, and the teleology within creation. So with all of that, Stoic ideas were still taken up. Now, cynicism and skepticism together created a philosophical climate for Paul that reached practical, street-level discussion, says Wright. It actually reached a street-level discussion in the marketplace. That reopened ultimate questions altogether. Plato and Aristotle were both revived in significance, so there was a threefold synthesis of philosophical climate that emerged for Paul of Plato, Aristotle, and Stoicism. But the key concept that we need to pick up here for the tone that would influence Paul is the concept of parrhesia, because it emphasized humility, plain speech, openness without pretense, openness toward all of the public. So it really was a influential concept of tone, the tone of, or the stance that Paul would take up with his theology of basically being founded on a humility. So the contribution from cynics and skeptics was the fact that truth is a dynamic process which we participate in. It is a dynamic, moving, and living truth, and we need to take it up in all humility and openness toward others. Key tonal contributions for Paul and his theology. So block 2, we're going to take a look at the emerging philosophical worldview. And we'll begin with the fact that it became an everyday schema of practical phronesis at street level. There was Stoicism throughout the Greek cities, and it did reach even the common language of the marketplace. The goal was to live in harmony with the physis and the logic. And what is really significant for Paul is that there were a group of emerging Stoic significations that emerged in this philosophical climate. Studied text took a priority. That language became sign-filled. Humility of simple clothing, humility of no luxury took a great place in Stoic belief. Negation of the ordinary was very prevalent. They took up newly spoken stories of significance for human existence, and the concept of ekpyrosis, of spiritual cycles of return and renewal, were also posited. And the concept of difference was posited as transcendence. And it was always anti-dogmatic. It was always a dynamic learning, dynamic ethics, dynamic epistemology. So it was a very rich tonal offering in resources for Paul to consider, because it was centered on humility. It was centered on parrhesia and ekpyrosis. So if you want to pick up the tone that would be coupled with the concepts in the triad on the left, the tone would be expressed in the two concepts of parrhesia and ekpyrosis. That openness and humility towards others, and that understanding of life as a cycle of taking up the Spirit and returning to the Spirit in an ekpyrosis, spiritual cycles of cleansing and renewal and spiritual maturity. So that takes us on to block 3. We're going to take a look at the qualified ultimate questions. Who are we? selves are those selves who are trying to understand the world. It's a world teeming with divine life, says the Stoics. What's wrong? We have to see through the surface darkness to the truth of the world and reach true happiness by enlisting Stoic philosophy. Outward appearance is not the true. It's beyond outward appearance. The solution is to study and grasp the truth of spirit, to live in harmony with the truth of the Logos Spirit, because all selves are to understand that the divinity dwells within creation and within humanity. Those are strong contributions of tone that are to be coupled with the strong contributions of concept in the variances of Stoic philosophy that we looked at and the triad on the left. The sharper Stoic answers were the fact that we are finite but indwelt by the Spirit. We are situated in a world directed by an inner teleology of the Logos, and we have as our task to live the examined ethical life and to cooperate with the spiritual indwelling Logos. Those are very, very similar tonal attributes for Christian theology and Paul. That's a significant contribution of tone to be coupled with the very significant contribution of concepts of the divine in our triad on the left. So it's a very powerful, powerful lesson that gives us information that we can now get more specific with, having in the previous lesson looked at the Stoic worldview. And we remember in that Stoic worldview that it was what? It was a cycle worldview of ekpyrosis, that return moment of ekpyrosis. The entire Stoic worldview led to that return moment, and it was a process within humanity of, remember, healing of fragmentation. It was cohesion, or it was Irene peace. That's very significant. We had that general understanding in the previous lesson on that benefit of offering the ideas of cohesion or healing of fragmentation. And now we've got additional, more specific contributions that basically, in summary, on the left, we could say that it's the contributions of God's presence, the Parakletos guardian, the emphasis on strict sexual ethics, the idea of God as subject, the idea of God as father, the idea of guardianship, and a key contribution of the concept of the elect, the eklektitos, and of course the teleosis of an inner working of the Logos as a directing spiritual force within creation. And from all of those specific contributions, we moved on to the tonality of parrhesia, open, honest speech without deceit, and the concept of a tonal ekpyrosis, tone of renewal and spiritual maturity. So we had, in this particular lesson, we've got a very balanced presentation of specific content from the Stoic worldview from N.T. Wright. He really does, in this lesson, put together the specific variances and offerings and rich field of thought offered to Paul out of the Stoic worldview that we had previously discussed. Now we see that rich field of resources in concepts that deal primarily with divinity and God's presence, and tone of humility, tone of no deception, tone of seeking ekpyrosis, spiritual maturity. Again, N.T. Wright helps us to really refine our understanding of the Greek self-consciousness of Paul. And I think this lesson, coupled with that previous picture we had, that graphic in the previous lesson on the Stoic worldview, I think that graphic plus the specific content here gives us tremendous, valuable contributions for understanding the Greek self-consciousness of Paul. Thank you to N.T. Wright for this tremendous lesson. We will have a recall triad in addition to this, and so I'm going to pause here, and then I'll offer that recall triad.